can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted to be joined by Danny. And we're here reacting to, well, Luis Ortiz calling out a certain Moses Itauma, a fight that, yeah, I've never really thought about, but now looking at it and you're thinking, do you know what? Is that the kind of test Moses Itauma needs? So yeah, Danny and I thought we'd jump on and give a bit of a reaction and our thoughts on whether the fight is going to happen, whether we want it to happen, how much of a test we think it's actually would be for Itauma. So yeah, we're going to dissect all of that in the next few minutes or so. But yeah, before we get into it, please subscribe to the channel if you're not doing so already, and yeah, like this video and let us know in the comments your thoughts. Danny, Ortiz against Moses Itauma. He obviously won there via knockout. Just in the last few days, Luis Ortiz at the weekend there. The Cuban fighter. I think he's officially 46. A veteran of the heavyweight division. Really only lost to the top level, I suppose, with kind of losing to Wilder when he was in his prime and in his heyday. What do you make of a potential Luis Ortiz Moses Itauma fight and his call out of the young Brit?
I think, first of all, it's a bit sad that Luis Ortiz is still carrying on. As you say, listed as 46, probably a good bit older than that in reality. Just never had the fights, I guess, to secure himself financially, never featured in a Riyadh season show. I'd like to see a bit more than this for a time his next fight. I do have to be honest. As you say, Ortiz lost to Wilder, lost to Andy Ruiz, but at 46, potentially even older, Itauma would just be way too sharp for him. I do think Ortiz, not that this is said much, would pose more of a tough night than Dillian White did. I think he's technically better, he's craftier, he's got better fight IQ. He probably still punches in terms of single shots a bit harder, but Itauma at his level of youth and exuberance, so just once the exchanges start going, it'll be way too quick. And I'd like to see someone who has more potential to take Itauma deep into a fight. Maybe I'm being harsh on Ortiz and there's more fire left, but at least 46, I can't imagine he'd pose too much of a threat for Moses Itauma.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. Like for one, it was just kind of I think it popped up on my Twitter being like, "Oh, flipping heck, he's actually still fighting Luis Ortiz."
Still alive.
Kind kind of a name I'd just forgotten about, to be perfectly honest with you. So fair play to him for that. Like fair play to him. Still fighting at that age. Kudos where he deserves that. But yeah, I do agree with your sentiment, mate. I think if Moses Itauma, like looking at his last fight against Dylan White, like I think he does. He's clearly world class. He's clearly going to win world titles, I think, and you know probably multiple world titles and could rule the heavyweight division for some time in the future. Um, but he still needs some more acid tests. And yes, okay, Luis Ortiz maybe could provide that to a certain degree, maybe take him a few more rounds. But ultimately, I'd rather see Moses Itauma in there with your top 10 kind of get guys, people who who themselves have aspirations of going on to win heavyweight world titles who aren't in their 40s, perhaps 50s, perhaps 60s. So yeah, I it's a fight like the fair play to Luis Ortiz for calling him out. Like not a lot of people want to fight Moses Itauma. Maybe he's just seeing that as a massive payday, so he can finally retire. Be like, right, I can finally retire if I get this big Itauma paycheck. But yeah, I it's fair play for him for calling him out. But I don't really want to see that. I'd rather see Moses Itauma in with a few other names. So yeah, that's what I think. I mean, before we round off, I may as well chat about briefly about a couple of names that maybe we haven't heard of any rumors as such. But like when you're looking at the near the top of the heavyweight division, is there any names that jump out at you? Because there's one fight that I would kind of like to see him next. I think it would make sense having this guy having fought on a couple of Queensberry cards recently. What do you think of a potential Moses Itauma Philip HRGOVIC clash?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense if you're Moses Itauma. I think it's a great fight for him. I think there's a chance you could get rounds. I don't think there's too much danger in the fight. Philip Hrgovic can't crack an egg at heavyweight. Moses Itauma will have a big advantage in speed, hand and feet, much more coordinated. And I think, to be honest, I think Hrgovic is there for the taking, and I think Itauma actually would stop him in 3, 4, 5 rounds. I think the way David Adelaide had that success in the 8th, 9th round, I think Filip Hrgovic's chin is not far off cracking. He's historically had one of the best chins in the heavyweight division, but I think the timing could be right for Itauma, not just to beat him, but to beat him in good fashion. Aside from that, it won't happen. I think it's still a fight that they'll view as having too much jeopardy. I'd love to see the Martin BAKOLE fight. A fit Martin BAKOLE, certainly not the one that got bowled over in 2 rounds by Joseph Parker. I think a fit Martin BAKOLE poses a real test for Moses Itauma. I think there's real jeopardy in that fight, which I think is why they'll still avoid it. I know there's been a bit of back and forth between the two teams. Aside from that, you want rounds, you look at maybe Otto Wallen, but that's a tough sell based on his performance against Derek Chisora. Didn't try to win that fight at any stage, and it's all well and good getting rounds, but there's journeymen out there who could probably give Itauma rounds. You want competitive rounds and rounds where he's asked a few questions. So BAKOLE, the one for me. Don't think it'll happen. Don't mind the Hrgovic one at all if that's what it is to be.
Yeah, I'm maybe a wee bit more upbeat about a potential Hrgovic fight actually happening, just simply because have his last 2 fights been Queensberry cards against Joyce and then Adelaide, and then I just think that with Hrgovic has a good rep. Well, I think he's had a few fights with the Saudis. Obviously, Itauma, one of Turkey's favourites as well. So, kind of say it would be easy enough to make. I think it does have world title implications because I think people still regard Filip Hrgovic as a top 10 heavyweight on the fringe of maybe earning himself a shot. So I like that fight for Itauma. I think it does go a few more rounds than his last few, but I completely agree with you, mate. I concur. I think Itauma would crack Hrgovic. I've always been, I mean, people say maybe a bit of a hater of Hrgovic, but like I've just been critical of him from the get-go. I never thought he was all that. And I kind of proved I just not in the first, well, in the Dubois fight. So yeah, I want to see the Itauma one. The BAKOLE one, I'd love to see that as well. But yeah, I'm less optimistic about it, to be honest with you, mate. And it's just one of them where, there's gonna have to be, you're just gonna have to at some stage say, right, okay, we'll just throw him straight into the Lions then. Will he fight in the likes of a Caballal in a final eliminator? Any of those guys who are like, deserve a world title shot. Say Joseph Parker, Fabio Wardley winner doesn't get a shot at Usyk. Does he fight the winner of that? Does he fight the loser of that? Kind of all of these fights I want to see Moses Itauma in with next. So yeah, I think he's the real deal. I think he's a world heavyweight champion in waiting. But yeah, I don't want to see the Ortiz one. I wouldn't mind the Hrgovic and BAKOLE ones and any of those top guys. Anything below that, I'm like, no, like Otto Wallen, you mentioned his name there. Like after his performance against Derek Chisora, like, mate, you need to retire. Do you know what I mean? So not interesting for me, but some of those names we mentioned, but yeah, kind of discussing the future for Moses Itauma, whether that Luis Ortiz call it, whether it happens or not, whether he fights somebody else remains to be seen. But yeah, stay tuned, and guys, let us know in the comments your thoughts on any of those fights we discussed. Who do you back Moses Itauma to beat? Who do you want to see him in with? Who will give him a real test next? As always, subscribe to the channel as well. Danny, pleasure as always, mate. Appreciate your time. I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, mate.